In music history, you've got your bad ideas, you've got your career-ending ideas, and then you have the time, the heart, the soul, and the main songwriter for America's most iconic punk band, the Ramones, trading his leather jacket for a tracksuit to become a rapper. No, that's not a joke that you had. It's not a fever dream. This is the very real story of how Douglas Colvin, the man the world knew as Dee Dee Ramone, decided to become Dee Dee King, a wannabe rap superstar. Music critic Matt Carlson wrote about his soul rap album. It will go down in the annals of pop culture as one of the worst recordings of all time. It was a move so baffling, so completely out of left field, it's now remembered as one of the most spectacular failures in modern music. But just calling it a failure kind of misses the entire point. This wasn't just a bad album, it was a desperate, bizarre, and ultimately tragic attempt by a man to escape the very legend he helped build. To understand why the guy who wrote 53rd and 3rd and Rockaway Beach ended up rapping about mermaids and mashed potatoes, you have to first understand the man who was coming apart at the seams. Before the gold chains and the drum machines, Dee Dee Ramone was punk rock royalty. If Joey was the voice and Johnny was the sound, Dee Dee was without a doubt the band's tormented soul. He was the group's most prolific lyricist, a kind of savant who would channel the grit, boredom, and anxiety of New York City into 3-chord anthems. His bass lines were a relentless locomotive, and his 1, 2, 3, 4 count-offs were the battle cry for a generation of misfits. Dee Dee lived the life that he wrote about. His lyrics weren't just stories, they were diary entries from the edge. Songs about drug addiction, violence, and mental health weren't an act, they were his reality. He was a figure of pure chaotic energy, a beautiful disaster in a leather jacket who always seemed to be holding on by a thread. And for over a decade, that's what made the Ramones so authentic. They weren't just playing punk rock, they were living it, and Dee Dee was their chief correspondent from the front lines. By the late 80s, that uniform had become a straitjacket. The Ramones, once the saviors of rock and roll, had settled into a grind. The endless touring, the bitter infighting, and the pressure to keep the same look and the same sound as well as the same scowl for 15 years had taken a massive toll. For a man like Dee Dee who thrived on chaos and rebellion, the new routine was a creative prison. The band, built on rejecting the mainstream, had become its own rigid establishment. The fun was gone, replaced by a grueling cycle of recording and touring that was only making his lifelong battle with addiction worse. He needed an escape, he needed a new identity, and he found one in one of the most unlikely of places. The spark for one of punk's most infamous chapters didn't ignite in a grimy club or a recording studio. It happened in rehab. While trying to get clean, Dee Dee was suddenly immersed in a new culture. It was there that he was properly introduced to the seismic energy of early hip-hop. He heard Run DMC, LL Cool J, and Schoolie D, and in their swagger and street-level storytelling, he saw the same raw energy that had created punk rock a decade earlier. It was a new kind of rebellion, and it was hip. He later explained his connection to it, saying, when Schoolie D came out and he'd say, "What time is it? It's Gucci time, you know?" I understood that. It's rising above oppression. I get it. Great. In Dee Dee's mind, rap was a new punk rock. It was the voice of the streets where anyone could grab a mic and tell their story. For a man feeling trapped by his own legacy, this was a revelation. He saw a path to a new creative life, one totally free from the expectations of Johnny Ramone and the punk rock faithful. His collaborator Daniel Ray noted that Dee Dee always needed a creative outlet, and since rapping didn't require a conventionally great singer, it seemed like a perfect fit. Just a few years prior, Aerosmith had teamed up with Run DMC to reimagine their 70s era hit Walk This Way. The collaboration was credited with revitalizing Aerosmith's career, and before the release of the single, Aerosmith had faded from the mainstream due to their struggles with substance abuse and less commercial success in the early 80s. In fact, their 1985 comeback album, Done With Mirrors, did not achieve strong sales or major hits. Dee Dee told the Boston Globe that the first rap record that touched him was Rodney Dangerfield's Rappin' Rodney, stating, "I thought it was hysterical for white people to act like that and start rapping. I thought I had a lot of humor in me, and I always wanted to do something humorous, so I made up Dee Dee King. I didn't take rap too seriously until I bought the second LL Cool J album. Then I saw a real writer, not just someone writing the fad."
I lose my place.
No respect, no respect.
Steak and sex, my favorite pet.
So Dee Dee made a choice. He started showing up to Ramones gigs in full rap gear, tracksuits, Kangol hats, and thick gold chains, much to the horror of his bandmates, especially the notoriously rigid Johnny. He wasn't just Dee Dee Ramone from Queens anymore, he adopted a new persona, Dee Dee King, a name he likely chose as a nod to blues legend B.B. King. This wasn't just a side project, this was a total transformation. In fact, he got a $25,000 advance from Warner Brothers, which according to his friends and studio mates at the time was chump change back in the day, and it was merely done as a favor to Dee Dee. He ended up walking into Chung King Studios in New York, a legendary spot that produced iconic records for Run DMC and Beastie Boys. The stage was now set for either a groundbreaking reinvention or an absolute train wreck. The resulting album, 1989's Standing in the Spotlight, is less a record and more a cultural artifact, a monument to bewildering ambition. It has a reputation as one of the worst albums ever made, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that on a first listen. My name is Dee Dee Ramone. But to dismiss it as just bad is to ignore its fascinating, almost surreal quality. The album is a chaotic mix of old-school hip-hop, 50s doo-wop, and pop-punk, all held together by Dee Dee's astoundingly awkward and offbeat rapping. One critic nailed it, describing it as sounding less like a rap record and more like a Ramones album that has rapping on it. Co-writer and co-producer Daniel Ray recalled about his time working with Dee Dee, stating he wasn't using street drugs. He was on meds and he smoked a lot of pot, but that was about it. He would come to my house to work in the afternoon. He would just write down an idea and we talk about what kind of song it would be, an angry song or a happy song or a beach song or a ballad. And then I would try to come up with some music that matched the lyrics and we put it down on a 4-track. Engineer Greg Gordon, who worked with Dee Dee, had also worked with hip-hop heavyweights like Public Enemy, LL Cool J, and Run DMC, but he claimed that Dee Dee's rap record wasn't made with hip-hop techniques. Gordon added that other hip-hop guys would come in, dig through old records, and find grooves and then try to play stuff off of each other. But Dee Dee's record was made more like an old-time rock record, just with a drum machine. Dee Dee was drawn to the extravagant, party-oriented side of rap, associating himself with the flashy Gucci gangster vibe, outwardly celebrating success and style, even if reality fell short. For Dee Dee, rap represented a cutting-edge way to project self-confidence and fun, making his album feel more like a lively party than a somber exploration of darker emotions. The opening track, a cover of Mashed Potato Time, immediately sets the tone. Over a clunky drum machine and sax squawks, Dee Dee declares it's time to rock, it's time to rap, it's time for the mashed potato attack. Mercedes, I like to impress the ladies. It's a moment so profoundly absurd, it just leaves you speechless. From there, the journey only gets weirder. On Commotion in the Ocean, Dee Dee tells a story about getting surfing lessons from a mermaid. The lyrics have a childlike, nonsensical quality that feels worlds away from the gritty poet who wrote about scoring drugs on Chinese rock. German kid und ich finde es gut, wenn Leute lachen. Ich hab the energy. Another notable track is German Kid, an ode to his heritage where he raps the chorus half American, half German, over a beat that feels more like a polka than hip-hop. His delivery is stiff, the rhymes are basic, and the flow is pretty non-existent. He sounds like a man reading a grocery list over a Casio keyboard demo track. And yet there's an almost undeniable, almost charming sincerity to the whole thing. The production handled by Daniel Ray was legitimate and even featured a guest appearance from Debbie Harry of Blondie. The engineer Greg Gordon noted that they didn't make the album with typical hip-hop sampling. Instead, they built it like an old-time rock record just with a drum machine, which explains its strange, uncanny valley feel. Gordon also said there's a huge element of self-aware humor, explaining, I don't think he was ready to get into the ring with LL Cool J. I think he believed he was the king of being Dee Dee Ramone. Released in the spring of 1989, just a few months before he officially left the Ramones, Standing in the Spotlight landed with a deafening thud. Commercially and critically, it was a complete disaster. It didn't chart, it didn't sell, and it didn't convince anyone that Dee Dee King was a serious artist. The reaction from both punk fans and the hip-hop community ranged from confusion to outright ridicule. Punk fans were just baffled. They saw their hero, a symbol of leather-clad authenticity, transformed into what looked like a parody. The hip-hop world, which was in its golden age with artists like Public Enemy and NWA, mostly just ignored it. When they did pay attention, it was as a joke. The album alienated everyone, and it was too weird for the punks and not nearly good enough for the rappers. The reviews were merciless. One of the most brutal came from the fanzine Maximum Rock and Roll. As producer Daniel Ray recalled, the magazine listed their 10 worst records of the year. With a special note that read, "We would have included the Dee Dee King album, but we only listed albums that were recorded in English." Dee Dee himself seemed to realize his mistake almost immediately. In a 1989 MTV interview right after leaving the Ramones, he was already distancing himself from the project. The grand experiment was over. The Dee Dee King persona was quietly retired. He had quit the Ramones to chase this dream, and when it blew up on the launch pad, he was left in a creative no man's land.
About 2 weeks ago, Joey and CJ Ramone took time off from their UK tour to drop by the studio and set us straight on Dee Dee's exit from the Ramones and the making of their new video.
He was doing like extracurricular kind of activity, like he was, doing solo projects, and that was fine with us. And but it's with Dee Dee, he's very self-centered, and after a while, everything was just, everything he kind of took to heart was just himself.
He later admitted the whole rap thing wasn't for him, stating plainly, "I couldn't do rap. I was trying. I don't know how. I just can't do it." The dream of reinvention had crashed into reality. Defeated, he did the only thing he could. He went back to punk rock. So why are we still talking about this album decades later? Because the story of Dee Dee King is more than just a footnote about a bad record. It's an essential, tragic, and hilarious chapter in the legend of Dee Dee Ramone. In its own weird way, standing in the spotlight tells us more about him as a person than many of his later punk records. It's a raw, unfiltered look at a man desperately trying to outrun his own shadow. He created Dee Dee Ramone to escape the pain of being Doug Colvin. And when being Dee Dee Ramone became its own prison, he created Dee Dee King to escape that. The album in all its clumsy glory is a testament to his restless, childlike, and often self-destructive creativity. Here was a man who would rather fall down spectacularly on his own terms than succeed by following a formula, even a formula he wrote. There's an innocence to the record that is both hilarious as well as heartbreaking. He genuinely loved early rap and wanted to be part of it. His attempt, though misguided, was completely sincere. It was a work of an artist who was always true to his impulses, no matter how chaotic. Interestingly, the album did leave one small positive mark on his old band. Johnny Ramone, who would initially roll his eyes at the whole thing, later decided the Ramones should cover The Crusher on their 1995 album Adios Amigos. According to those close to Dee Dee, that gesture meant the world to him. It was a sign that Johnny, his eternal rival, had actually listened and found something worthwhile in it. A small validation at the end of a long, strange journey. Ultimately, the Dee Dee King saga humanizes a punk rock icon. It reminds us that behind the snarling caricature was a deeply sensitive and troubled man. His lifelong struggles with addiction and mental health were well documented. Tragically, these battles would ultimately claim his life. On June 5, 2002, Dee Dee Ramone died from a heroin overdose at the age of 50 after he was found in his Hollywood apartment. His death was a final heartbreaking chapter to a life lived on the edge. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please give us a like and consider subscribing for more stories from the strange and wonderful corners of rock and roll. We'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.